Howdy everybody. How y'all this evening? I have come to do a discussion on my latest presentation, which was The Three Little Men in the Woods, a Grimm's fairy tale. This discussion and the story and all my other stories and discussions can be found on my playlist called Storytime on my channel. And these stories are not for kids. So there's a line drawing that I wanted to share with y'all. Line drawing of the Three Little Men in the Woods. And I had a few thoughts and thought I would share them with you. I'm going to try and kind of stay on topic because I tend to ramble. And I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And anyway, let's get to it. A discussion on the Three Little Men in the Wood. This story starts out with a common dilemma. A widowed woman and a widowed man have daughters that are acquaintances, and the woman sends word that she will treat her stepdaughter very well, even better than her own daughter, if the man will consent to marry her. This, and then there's references to milk to wash in and wine to drink. And this may seem odd to our modern sensibilities, but in these days it was just simply a sign of wealth and luxury and of being cared for to have these items provided instead of just plain water. The man doesn't agree immediately. He actually refers to the old saying that marriage is a blessing and a torment. So he's very back and forth about it, and he has his daughter perform a test. It's kind of a superstitious thing. It's kind of the equivalent of flipping a coin, except for he kind of hedges his bets a little bit because one would not expect a boot with a hole in it to hold water. But it does. And the deal was if it held water, then he would marry. So he marries the woman. As is often the case, we do not hear of father again. I feel like the people's lives and their roles in their specific lives were very gender specific. The women were together and they were in the house, and the lady of the house had total control in the domestic world. But men, they had business that kept them away from home for extended periods of time, even going abroad for months or sometimes even years. So the loving but absent father and the wicked stepmother scenario must have been a daily reality for many young women of the time, causing this story to strike a chord that made it memorable so that it was repeated and it stayed alive until it was recorded. This is a classic. It's a good daughter versus bad daughter tale where goodness, that the politeness, the diligence, respect, humbleness, this is greatly rewarded by the mysterious men in the wood. Whereas the badness or the lazy, disrespectful, selfish behavior, that is punished. The blessings and curses are similar, but they're on different ends of the spectrum. Good gets gold coins falling from her mouth at every word, and bad gets the same, but with horrible, disgusting toads. It even goes so far as to say that everyone was quite disgusted that came near her. Good grows more beautiful with every day, while bad grows uglier daily. And the final proclamation that while good will marry a king, bad will die horribly. So, using the birth of the good daughter's son, the prince, as an excuse, the jealous stepmother and stepdaughter travel to the palace, pretending to come and pay their respects and visit. They are so jealous of the poor girl that they murder her, or at least attempt to murder her. It's unclear if she actually died from these murderous actions. But they murder her by throwing her out of the window into a stream. Then they try to pass off the stepsister as the queen to her husband, the king, and he falls for it, at least for one night, because the stepmother says she's sick and she's ill and weak and he must stay away from her. Unbeknownst to all but the boy who sleeps in the kitchen, the good queen had somehow been transformed into the shape of a duck and was using the gutter system of the castle to come and look after her son. Upon speaking to the boy in her duck form, and here it's written in italics, and it's question answer back and forth. It's like a sing song type thing, and I think this is a remnant of a song because it has rhyming and meter, a question and answer. It really seems like a little piece of song still in there. Anyway, she tells him to bring the king and to have him brandish his sword over the duck-shaped form 3 times while on the threshold. Now, thresholds are important places of magic and transformation. They're often mentioned in fairy tales. In fact, we still retain some of this in our own culture when a groom carries his bride over the threshold. So, without telling anyone about the queen or what has come to pass between them, he asked the stepmother what type of punishment should a person receive who tried to kill another by throwing him out the window. Or by throwing him in the river, is what he actually asks her. And in accordance with her cruel heart, she suggests rolling the offender down the hill into the river in a barrel studded with nails. That's just horrible. And so she pronounces her own sentence when she answers the king in this fashion. So this story has many classic elements. This is almost like a straight out of the fairy tale kit, just basic blocks, except for one point. Many fairy tales seem to be in this vein. The evil stepmother is dead set against the sweet daughter. This is a reoccurring theme. But this story has the strangely unexplained duck shape. The queen takes the form of a duck, and it's not explained how that happens at all. So the 3 men in the wood are not surprising, nor are their requests of or reactions to the 2 girls. Many stories feature hermits or other beings that have magical abilities and they live on their own deep in the woods. Here you can kind of think of like Disney's version of Sleeping Beauty, the 3 good fairies in the woods that are raising Briar Rose and no one knows they're there. So this is a reoccurring thing. What I find interesting is that somehow, and we aren't even hinted to at how this may have happened, the queen does not die, but is transformed instead into the shape of a duck. Again, this is birds and fairy tales. They often represent messages from the other world, and in this case seem to be kind of a placeholder for the queen until the king can discover the truth and change her back. As with many people in fairy tales who have been transformed, she knows exactly how to be changed back. Also, the tiny hero of the kitchen boy is often part of a tale. And I think they put the kitchen boy or a similar character in to make it more relatable to the listeners. Many more children and even people could identify with a character like the kitchen boy than with the queen or the evil stepsister. And the kitchen boy actually saves the day by being in the right place at the right time and running to tell the king the news of his wife. I think this isn't just tacked on like it might first appear, even though he's only mentioned briefly and we never know his name. In fact, we don't know any of the characters' names in this story. They're queen, king, stepmother, good daughter, bad daughter, father, kitchen boy. So that he seems insignificant, the boy from the kitchen. And I think that's the point, that even someone as little and unimportant as the kitchen boy can change the course of events by their actions. And of course, we end on a horribly bloody note, which is in fact just as common as Happily Ever After in the original fairy tales. They are awesome. They are cool. They end really wonderfully. They are also bloody and horrible and end tragically. The people of these times loved revenge and bloody justice. To be rolled down a hill in a narrow, nail-studded barrel, then to drown is horrendous, but it is also darkly imaginative. A horrible and torturous way to die that took some thinking to come up with. And what a dark note to end on, leaving the listener to imagine what the stepmother and sister's awful last moments must have been like. While modern children would be horrified and disturbed, even some adults would be horrified and disturbed by this ending, I imagine the children at the time would have cheered the demise of the villains. The more gruesome their demise, the better they would have liked it. These children had different sensibilities. They had hard, often short lives. They were expected to work long hours with little food, inadequate clothing, and no rest. Most had lost a parent. Many were orphans and were farmed out to relatives. Some, I'm sure, simply starved or froze on the street like the little match girl. So they were tough, and their stories reflected that. While honesty, kindness, respect for elders, and generosity were highly valued, they also liked a good hanging or execution. Many families would bring picnics to executions, and they would make a day of it. These are the times in which these stories were told, and these are the children that loved them and retold them to their own children, the ones that made it old enough to have children. They were a very different kind of child altogether than what we're familiar with in modern times. I think of the audience for these stories. I think of their little faces. I imagine the kids that these stories were intended for. And I feel sorry for them. But in reality, I think they would reject my pity and would mock me for being soft. These were tough kids. Their stories are brutal and impactful. They push your buttons, and they intend to. I find this fascinating and would love to hear what you think about it. So let's chat in the comments. Let me know, and thanks for joining me. And come back. We'll have another story time. Till then, y'all be sweet.